One element in encounters, whether combat encounters or role-playing encounters, that is important, sometimes vitally important in real life, but rarely looked into in games or even fiction, is maneuvering for position. Um, Julius Caesar once won a battle without a sword being swung. He maneuvered his army, the opponent maneuvered in response, and they maneuvered until the other army was in such a position it couldn't beat Caesar's, and they surrendered without a blow being struck. Maneuvering can make a big difference to your position, your strength, the strength of your position, both in role playing, in conversation encounters or battle encounters. But it's rarely something that's considered in role playing games, in my experience. It works best in the wilderness, where you can see other parties, other groups over miles. Then two things can happen. They can totally ignore each other and go their own way. A few things can happen. They can totally go their own ways, or they can head towards each other without any consideration of terrain and what's in between. But the most likely outcome is that both parties will assess the other one from a distance and maneuver themselves to a position where they have the advantage should the two of them meet. Now, if a stronger a group that thinks they're stronger than the other, may ignore this advantage or leave this advantage and go directly towards the other one. But it's foolhardy to ignore things which give you advantages. High ground, defending a bridge or a choke point. At sea, if you're sailing, the weather gauge that's upwind, a sailing ship that was upwind could basically had a maneuverability and speed advantage on ones that were downwind, and could choose when and where, when they would have the encounter and whether or not to press the encounter or retreat. And so a lot of time would be spent beating up to get the weather gauge, and sometimes chases between ships would go on for days, even weeks, as one maneuvered, the other maneuvered. You'd lose sight of them in the weather, gain sight of them again from working out the direction of travel. Similarly, on land, armies rarely just saw each other and immediately went for a battle. One side would avoid the other until it got itself into a position where it thought it had a chance, or until it escaped. And most battlegrounds were hardly ever random. And this is an element in role-playing games that is rarely looked at, but it allows players to make decisions and use skills that often are not used in combat, and allows other characters and other skills to come to the fore. Rangers or druids who have special abilities in nature, barbarians even, they usually come to the fore in combat, but they can use their outdoor abilities to get into a better position, to lead the opponent through terrain where they won't be comfortable and the party will have an advantage. The bard can taunt the opposition to leave a very strong position. In the Battle of Hastings, where William the Conqueror defeated the Saxons and conquered England, the Saxon shield wall was unassailable and was turning back all the cavalry charges until the Conqueror's cavalry. This is according to the standard interpretation, the cavalry fell back before the shield wall, apparently in retreat, and the one wing of the shield wall thought they'd won the battle and charged after them. And it was by abandoning their defensive position, their strong position, that William the Conqueror were tempting them to abandon their strong position, that William the Conqueror was actually able to break the shield wall and win the battle and win England. So taunting your opponents, tricking your opponents, fleeing or pretending to flee. Another standard tactic were in sailing was they put all their sails on and looked like they were going at full speed, but they'd actually be dragging a log or something under the water to slow down their progress, so they weren't actually trying to escape, even though they looked like they were trying to escape, to draw the opponent into a position where or to draw their opponent, a weaker opponent, closer, by giving the impression that they were scared of this opponent. There are various tactics and tricks that can be played and bring another element, not the immediate visceral punchiness of a physical combat, but allowing other elements to be explored and come to the fore in a role-playing game. Tactical elements. Something I enjoy, but it's not for everybody. I've tried it in some games, and the GM's responded, and I've enjoyed it, and it's brought out another element. I've tried it in others, and the GM doesn't do it. You know, the greatest distance between encounters is 2 rounds to get into combat distance, and in that kind of situation, there's no chance of maneuvering and getting to a defensible or a tactically superior position, and the interplay of the 2 groups that goes on in this traveling. Anyway, my name is Caius. I love role-playing games, and I hope this talk on maneuvering and tactics will inspire you to try or introduce this element into your games. Do you use them, or is it just dragging out an element of the game that you find uninteresting? I hope to see you in a game.